Berlin is Sudha David-Wilp, Senior Transatlantic Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. That's a public policy think tank promoting cooperation and understanding between the United States and Europe. Sudha, thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, how do you think the results of these midterm elections, and obviously they're not complete yet, but how do you think they might affect US foreign policy?
Good morning, Anita. Yeah, I think that's what everybody in Europe is wondering, especially whether the election results are sort of a harbinger for 2024. Berlin especially is very nervous about a Republican gain in Congress, because it looks like the GOP will not really wield a resounding majority, but nonetheless, the Republicans may feel emboldened and will probably launch raucous investigations into Hunter Biden, the Afghanistan withdrawal, and perhaps even draw up articles of impeachment with President Biden. And Europe is very worried about a polarized America, an America that's losing its democracy with election deniers on the ballot. The Republican Party had over half of its candidates did not believe that the 2020 election results were sound. But on the flip side, I think that it could also be a wake-up call for Americans in 2024 if Republicans do overreach, if they do get the majority in Congress, and they remember the chaos of Trump and the Republicans being the party of no. But of course, it will also affect foreign policy, specifically Ukraine.
Did you feel that under the Trump presidency, America was distracted, to use that word, from its foreign policy obligations, because it felt like the country became much more inward looking? There was a lot of fighting going on internally. Is that part of the fear in terms of foreign policy, international relations?
Well, I think for specifically the transatlantic relationship, as I mentioned before, I think Ukraine is definitely going to be a very significant issue in U.S. foreign policy moving forward. If the Republicans do gain the majority in the House, it will probably mean less support for Ukraine down the road. And that lines up with GOP voter sentiments. According to a Wall Street Journal poll, about 48% of Republicans think the U.S. is doing too much, which means Republicans and maybe even Democrats moving forward will want to see Europe step up when it comes to Ukraine, but even more than that, increase its defense capabilities. It's already happening here in Europe, but it's more of a catch-up rather than necessarily being attuned to geopolitical realities when it comes to working with the U.S. on China and Russia. And to your question, yes, I think that Europeans are afraid that Americans are turning more isolationist and not necessarily valuing the alliance system as it has done so in the past in the post-Cold War period. And I think Europeans are realizing that era is over.
And just finally, looking a little further afield to Russia and China, which you just mentioned, if we do see the Republicans take control of the House of Representatives, as the projections suggest, what do you think that means for the relationship between the USA or its policies towards those two countries?
Well, I think, right now there is a lot of bipartisan support for, foreign policy stance vis-a-vis Russia and China. And I think that both Democrats and Republicans are going to want to have Europe do more in its own neighborhood. And that also means, looking forward about the reconstruction of Ukraine and seeing what happens with Russia, but also pulling its weight and helping the U.S. Stand strong against the geopolitical challenge of China. And that seems a little wobbly right now because, of course, countries like Germany are also perhaps deepening its dependency, its trade relations with China. And I think that's not necessarily going to endear Europe with Capitol Hill.